Jory's gonna hit record. Oh, perfect. So just a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. Just gonna mention if everyone could please stay muted throughout the presentation. We also have the chat function up. So if you have any questions and want to put them in the chat box, please feel free to go ahead and do so. I won't be checking the chat box during my presentation, but I have left time at the end to kind of go through and do a Q&A. So I'll just scroll back up and start going through whatever's in there. So to get started, I'm gonna do a screen share. This is always the moment of truth. And of course, this presentation is being recorded and I will make the slides available later. So don't feel like you have to be frantically writing down notes through all of this. So can you see my screen? I'm gonna look to see if there's not, yes, I'm seeing nodding. Okay, great. So today's topic is on accessing the Women in Leadership Archives online. All of the photos today, if they're not more contemporary photos of Piper Hall or something like that, do come directly from the Mundelein College photo collection. So I did try to spice it up a little bit and try to use some photos that we hadn't used before. I've also got some more contemporary ones from the 70s and 80s. So you might see some familiar faces every now and again, trying to get some weekend college in there too. So what we'll cover today, first I'll give you some basic information about archives in general and then the WLA specifically. Then I'll get into acquisitions, so how we acquire different collections, what types of things we collect, and then if you're interested in donating something, how you could go about and do that. I'll then go into some recent projects we've been working on. Then we'll kind of shift over and visit the WLA's webpage. And I'll go through some of the more, I don't want to say important parts of the webpage, but things that might be of greatest use to this audience. I'll describe how to use a finding aid when you're doing your own research online, and so that you can better communicate with us when you have a research request. And then lastly, I'll cover some digital items and exhibits that are Mundelein College related and show you Preservica, which is our online system that hosts all of our digital objects. Then lastly, we'll have the Q&A for any questions you might have accumulated along the way. So getting the ball rolling, what are archives? Archives are collections of items that have enduring value. So whenever I talk about value during my presentation or within the context of archives, we're always talking about enduring value. So research value, historic value, things of that nature, rather than monetary value. The word archives itself can refer to the materials. It can refer to the building that the materials are housed in. It can refer to the department. It can refer to an organization that is an archive. It can refer to the professional discipline. So it gets used in all these different ways. And one feature that I want to mention about archives is that they can be comprised of various formats, topics, and creation dates. So it's not like when you hear about things that are like vintage or antique, that usually those have very specific dates attached to them, that it has to be of a certain era or from a certain time span. There's not that same assumption with archives. It's really about value and what we think might be of interest in the future. So we could have items in our collection that are quite contemporary. We could be collecting things that were even created in the past year or so. So getting into the Women in Leadership Archive specifically, here we have a picture of Piper Hall. Piper Hall is looking quite different today, of course. If you follow us on Facebook, we had a photo a couple days ago of some snowmen that people built, which is really cute. So the Women in Leadership Archives was established in 1994. We had our beginnings with Mundelein College. As I mentioned, we're physically located in Piper Hall, although many of us are working from home today. Piper Hall was once the Mundelein College Library and served a various number of functions over the years. And the Women in Leadership Archives is both a part of the Gannon Center for Women in Leadership, as well as a part of the university library system.
CLR Wonder.
Oh, sorry, going to continue on. So what we do at the WLA, we collect and make available permanently valuable, there's that word again, talking about that permanent value, records of women and women's organizations, which document women's lives, roles, and contributions. So again, we kept this charge rather open-ended so that we could have these different areas of collecting focus, which I'll get into in just a minute or two. We serve a wide variety of users. So I wanted to note that although, of course, we are a part of Loyola and we serve the Loyola community, we do not exclusively serve the Loyola community. So you do not have to be affiliated with the college or university. You do not have to be affiliated with any college or university. Anyone is free to use our archives, and we welcome questions and inquiries from anyone. You do not have to be doing anything for publishing. It could be for your own genealogical research or interest. So talking a little bit more about our research interests, or I'm sorry, services provided. This is sort of catered to our current working environment. You know, normally we have Piper Hall open for people to come in for research services, or you know, have people coming by appointment. Now in our current environment, I do want to emphasize that we are still open in some way, shape, or form, and that we do have limited staffing at Piper Hall. So we do still have access to our physical collections there. So we have that access, the staff has access, but unfortunately we can't invite you to be in Piper Hall with us right now with the current rules and restrictions. So what we can offer for you are these different remote services, so remote research and reference. So if you call or email us, and I will note I'm going to have an entire slide at the end that has all of our contact information on it, and I'll have that up the entire time during the Q&A, so you can jot that down. So again, saving that for the end. So you can contact us there at our email or by phone, and we can physically look through those records for you. We can digitize things for you, so that's that digitization on demand. If there is a photo that hasn't been digitized yet, happy to do that for you. And then we're also still working on collection acquisitions, which is what I'm going to be talking about next. So collections acquisitions is basically donating your different items. So I chose this picture because, again, it's really appreciated if you contact us first, whether it's by phone or email, just so that we know that items are coming, so that we can be aware of it and keep an eye out for it. And also so that we can have that conversation beforehand to make sure that it is a good fit for our collections. So since I'm guessing most of you here today are associated with Mundelein College in one way or another, there is a pretty good chance that that item or items that you'd like to donate are going to be a good fit. This kind of gets in more with some of our other collections. But again, it is still nice for us to have that conversation beforehand. Also want to emphasize that it is perfectly fine and actually preferred if you send those items as is. So you don't need to clean them, you don't need to dry clean them, you don't need to frame them. You really don't need to do anything special to your records before you send them to us. We actually prefer to sort of have them in that unadulterated state. So if you're sending papers to us, you know, that you're not reorganizing them, we really appreciate having that original order. If you have notes that you want to give us, you know, you can email those notes, or you can write them on a piece of paper, but trying to avoid using post-it notes or other things like that, because that can be really damaging to the item. And then lastly, once we've kind of had that conversation, then we would receive that item by mail, and it would get integrated into the collection. So talking a little bit more about the types of things that we collect. These are all of our general collection subject areas, and as you can see, we have quite a few. I won't read them out, because again, I'm assuming today we're mostly going to be talking about Mundelein related. But I did want to highlight a little bit more about some of our formats that we collect. So as you're thinking about items that you would potentially donate to the WLA, or in thinking about the types of things that the WLA might have that might be of interest to you when you're doing your own research, these are the types of things that we collect and that we're always on the lookout for. So these include paper items. I think that's what's most associated with archives. That could be things like letters, correspondence, personal diaries and journals, It could be ephemera, so if you have flyers and posters from events, any sort of like meeting minutes from clubs that you were a part of, schedules that you kept, brochures. It could also be bound paper items as well. So if you had an old copy of a yearbook or a publication or a journal that the college put out, those are things we're always looking for as well. Also with paper, thinking about scrapbooks or things of that nature. So those types of bound items too. And this list here is not exhaustive. This is really just to kind of give you a taste of what we have, and also again to kind of get those wheels turning on the type of things that you might want to think about donating someday. Going into audiovisual, again, wasn't going to list every single type of format out there, but you know, we accept cassettes, reel-to-reel, VHS, Betamax, what have you. Photographs kind of same as well. We do have framed and unframed photos. So photographic prints, we have slides. Three-dimensional objects are accepted on a case-by-case basis. And again, that really is because we want to make sure that we are sticking to our collection scope, that we are able to care for the item, and that we're able to realistically make it available to people. So some examples of three-dimensional objects that I get asked questions about and that we usually accept are any sort of wearable items. So beanies, yes. So beanies, class rings, if you have like old like sweaters or blazers, things like that, we do take those quite a bit, and we're always happy to display them. Electronic records is another one that I have on here as sort of a case-by-case basis. Again, just because I could talk about that by itself just for a full hour about, you know, kind of the nuances of that. That's really going to depend on what type of electronic records you're keeping, what kind of format they're in, et cetera, et cetera. So if someone's interested in donating electronic records, we always want to have that kind of larger conversation with them about what we sort of can and can't do with those types of records. But we do, of course, have electronic records, and we have things that you know, were digitized before they came to us, and then we have things that we're digitizing ourselves as well. So I wanted to mention some areas for collection growth, so areas that I think we'd be particularly interested in. Again, this is not meant to be exhaustive, so if you don't see something on here, but it's something that you have found in your basement or attic and are thinking about donating, there's still a very, very, very good chance that we would accept it. But I really wanted to highlight these because there are areas where I feel that we could use more in these areas, and that they are highly requested. And I'd love to start filling some of those gaps and making them available for people. Again, our collections are really based on what people are able to donate to us. So as those things come to us, then we're able to kind of fill those gaps in history. So the first kind of theme I put was items related to the student experience. Again, our archives were grown out of those sort of administrative records from Mundelein College. So always looking to capture more about student life, things about clubs and organizations, things about the dorms, campus life in general. Items related to various academic programs and institutes, some of those more specific programs and sort of people's experiences going through them. Items from the later years, so really kind of from the 1970s onwards. And my reasoning for this is twofold. One, as we're getting into reunions, those are kind of the years that we're getting into now. So just kind of thinking ahead to have those items prepared as we celebrate those reunions and anniversaries. And then also because those years tend to be a little bit more underrepresented in our archives. So we'd love to see more from those classes as well. And then lastly, I put photos, photos, photos. We can never have enough photos, always looking to make more of them available, and working very hard to digitize more for you all. So again, if you have photos, always happy to receive those as well. I'm going to have this last slide up here just for a blink of an eye while I go ahead and set up our webpage. So as I said, I will have this up at the end. You'll have many minutes to look at it. I'm just going to bring our webpage up. So next I wanted to talk about some of the projects that we have been working on over the past year or two. So in addition to receiving donations of collections, we've also had the very generous monetary support of several donors. So I wanted to give thanks for some of those grants and kind of highlight some of the things that we have been able to do, even in light of sort of the current work from home situation. So one thing that we were able to do was have quite a few items from Gloss Polak translated and made available on Preservica, which I'm going to show in a little bit. So this was a donation that we received from the Polish Women's Alliance. And we found some articles that were related to the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage in the United States. So very timely. Again, that was thanks to that grant. We also had a grant from the Llewellyn Family Foundation where we were able to go and have conservation work done on some individual items and have them digitized as well. So we had things like photographs that had been rolled due to just age and condition, and they were able to unroll some of those photographs. They were able to do some preservation work on some scrapbooks that we had, so to those original objects, as well as digitize them. So we are very thankful for that project as well. So when we have donations of that nature and have these grant projects, all of that money tends to go directly towards collections, care, and digitization to make sure that things are widely available, not just for now, but for going many years into the future as well. So as advertised, I'm going to go through and kind of show you some of the major features of our website. Make this a little bit bigger. There we go. So when you first get to our page, our main navigation is here. So if you haven't signed up already, we do have an email list that we're going to start using in the spring. We're going to be launching a bi-monthly newsletter. So if you would like to be on that list and receive that first newsletter out later this spring, you can go ahead and sign up here. We also have a very active social media presence. So we post on Facebook a couple of times a week. Again, that's where you'll hear event announcements like the event we're having today. We also have a YouTube page. Our most recent video was for Fat Tuesday. If you haven't seen this video already, it's really fun. We've got a recipe for donuts, and that comes straight from our archives. We tend to update our YouTube videos about once a month, and we feature items from the collections. So we had one in December on the candle lighting tradition with Mundelein. We have had quite a bit of Mundelein content on there so far. And then we also have more general content on how to use archives, so kind of smaller, more digestible things, kind of similar to the presentation today, but closer to 10 minutes. We also have a blog that we update on a regular basis, and these tend to be updates about our collections, so you might get more info there that you wouldn't necessarily find in a finding aid. This tends to be a little bit more narrative. We update this about once a month, and we highlight our most recent ones here. So I'll kind of show you what that blog page looks like. Again, this is a great place just to search. So even if I just search Mundelein right away, you can scroll and see that there's quite a few hits. Going back to our main page, again, our news section is right in the middle, so you can see what has been going on recently. I'm not going to talk too much about these first two bars on our page just because we've kind of gone over them already, but anything I've said in my presentation, it's up here as well. So let's go into collections a little bit so I can tell you more about how to use a finding aid. So our finding aids are divided in a couple of different ways. And just to clarify what a finding aid is, a finding aid is your guide to an individual collection. So it's going to contain an inventory, usually at the folder level, of what's actually in the collection. And then you're also going to have some administrative info, so background information about what types of things are in it. So just how we talked about, you know, photos and correspondence and stuff like that. It'll list all of that out. It'll list the different dates that are present and so on and so forth. So we've divided up this page into two main ways, really. So we have our personal papers, which are individuals. So this is all alphabetical order by last name, so you can just scroll through or use the navigation at the top to jump down to the letter that you want. We also have organization records, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It's you know, different nonprofits and other types of organizations, and this is where you're going to find the Mundelein records in particular. We'll get to the Mundelein specific finding aids in a little bit, but I'm going to start you all off with one of the personal papers just because it's a little bit more manageable to look at. If you keep scrolling down the page, you'll also see that we have things divided out by subject. So again, this is a clickable list. So if you're looking for a particular subject, what might be of particular use here, we have 2 different subjects for Mundelein College. So you can click that. And then you've got this whole nice list here. I'm going to scroll all the way back up so you can see what those individual listings look like. So with each individual and organization that we have on here, it's also just going to give just a teeny bit of information about them. And if they do have some kind of affiliation with Mundelein College, it's going to be right here as well. So again, you'll see that right there as you're scrolling, or you have that nice list at the bottom. We have listed every collection that we have legal ownership here. So not all of our collections have reached a point where they have a finding aid yet. So if you come across a collection that doesn't have a link to a finding aid yet, don't be discouraged. We've also got the hyperlink to our email here. You can always email us and we're happy to kind of, again, go through and answer your question for you. Our policy is that even if we haven't created an inventory yet, it's still considered open to the public. It is still fair game for research. So again, please let us know if you have that interest. So the finding aid that I'm gonna start with is Ann Carr, because again, we've got this nice Mundelein affiliation here. It's a little bit of a smaller finding aid. It's gonna take a moment to load. So with the finding aids, as you can see, it kind of popped open to this new screen. So they're all saved as a PDF. So it will open up in your web browser, but if you prefer to download, you can always download them as well if that's easier for you to read. And they should be pretty easy to print out too if you're someone that would prefer to have that physical copy and take notes on it or what have you. So I'm going to walk you through the different parts of the finding aid so that as you're doing that research or having that correspondence with WLA staff, you'll be able to communicate more effectively. So at the very top of all of our finding aids, we have the name of the collection. So if you wanted more information about a collection, you could just use the name here and then we'll know exactly what you're talking about. The dates down here are not the dates relating to the person or organization. Those are the dates of items that are in the collection. So the dates start at 1964. Now, when you get to creator and you see the dates next to the name, that's the date that is related to the person or organization themselves. So this would be the birth date and the death date of that person, or the creation date and the end date of the organization in question. Now, creator and provenance might be the same person or they might be different. So the creator is the person who actually, wrote, recorded, collected all of these things. Oftentimes that's the same person who donates to an archive, but not always. So it could be, one of their relatives or a friend or something like that. The extent tells you how big the collection is. So we always measure in linear feet. So a linear foot is if you just have a ruler and you're just measuring the length of the shelf. That is a linear foot. So again, that kind of gives you an idea of how big the collection is. The processor and then updated by, that's just telling you the staff who worked on the collection. Getting to administrative information, access restrictions. There is any kind of restriction on what you are or aren't allowed to see, that would be here. Certain parts of a very small percentage of the collections that we have might have restrictions on them due to privacy reasons. So the bulk of the collection will be available and perhaps 1 or 2 folders or 1 box won't be available until a later date. Again, Fairly rare, but it would be noted. Usage restrictions, that's usually where you're gonna find things about copyright. So usually when we're working with researchers, we always refer them back to whoever that copyright holder is. And this information is always getting outlined here. Preferred citation is pretty self-explanatory. If you were doing something a little bit more formal or publishing something, that's how we prefer that you cite it. Provenance, that's just the history of the collection. So again, this collection, everything was donated by Dr. Carr, but not always the case for all of our collections. If it had been donated by someone other than by her, that would be noted there. Separations, that's as we're going through the collections, if there was anything that needed to be discarded, which is very rare, or go back to the donor. Things that might go back to the donor, usually it's duplicates. So if we get a box of, say, 20 copies of the same book, we might want to keep 2 or 3 and then ask them if they would like those copies back, or if perhaps we could give them to another institution. So anything that comes through our door that comes through with these papers, if we've gone through it, we always know, if it gets returned back to the donor or goes to another institution. See also, this is to help you further in your research. So if we have similar collections that are connected, we're going to note them here. So we're telling you to look out for the Mundelein College archives. And then occasionally we also do list collections belonging to other institutions that might be helpful too. So in this case, we talked about the BVM archives in Iowa. Biography is also fairly self-explanatory, so we're going to have all that basic vital information like birth and death date and their like professional and personal life. Scope and content, this is where we start to get into the actual organization of the collection. So the scope and content note really exists to give you insight into the logic and explanation behind how we researched everything and how we arranged everything. So here we're going to tell you, again, the span once again that everything was created in. We're going to tell you how we divided those up, so into what series, and what type of things you might find. So again, we're seeing sermons and talks, we're seeing articles, we're seeing book reviews. This is mostly a paper collection, but again, if we had a collection that had photographs in it or AV materials, that would be noted too. So series can be divided either by content or by type of object. So again, if we had more different types of objects here, we might have an AV series, we might have a photo series, but since this one is mostly paper, it's mostly divided by topic or subject. So we have these series, and we could also possibly have sub-series as well. So if, again, I'll go with my AV example, maybe we'd have an audiovisual collection, and that might get subdivided into VHS and Betamax, for example. Or if you had a photo collection, that might be divided up by personal photos and professional photos, and those would be the 2 sub-series. Again, this is a fairly small collection, so it doesn't get into quite that much detail. So we do have these 4 different series. It's going to give you detail about each of those series. So again, the types of materials that you could expect to find in them might go into format a little bit. And again, it just kind of gives you that narrative. And then it's also telling you where they're located too. So we number all of our boxes and folders so you know exactly where it is. We also have a list of subjects. So again, if you were just kind of searching through, those are kind of keywords that you might stumble upon. And now, after all that preamble, we're getting to the actual inventory of the collection, what's actually in it. So we have everything listed out here by box and then by folder. So as I mentioned, we tend to go down to the folder level in our level of description. So everything's going to say what box, what folder, it's going to have a title, and then we're going to have the date. So a little bit of background about the dates that you might encounter. So ND, that means no date. So we don't have a date for it. You might also see undated, means the same thing. When you have something that's in brackets, that's our best guess. If you see a question mark, that's our best guess. If you see a bracket and a question mark, then we're really guessing. So again, those are just kind of to show that uncertainty. Scrolling through, again, everything's going to have a title. So if you were corresponding with us and you, again, in sort of the pre-work from home times, if you were gonna come in person, you could make that request beforehand and say, I'd like to make an appointment possibly on one of these days, and I'd love it if you could pull boxes 1 and 2. Or if you're emailing or calling us and you wanted something digitized, you could say, I'd love to see box 1, folder 7, if that could be digitized. Again, that really is a huge help for us if you already know which materials, and then we can just start to work through your wish list of those things that you'd like to see. So I'm going to keep scrolling because this finding aid is also a good example of something that has had accruals. So as we're scrolling through, you can see all those different series that I mentioned. So we have an addendum, and we add addendums to finding aids when additional items are added later. So oftentimes a donor will give us a collection, and then a year later, maybe more than that, they'll come back and say, hey, I've got some more items for you. And this is how we handle that. Rather than trying to integrate them back into the collection and like reorganize everything, so that would be a huge undertaking, we add that on as an addendum. And we have such a lovely relationship with our donors that we do have quite a few addendums on our collection. So make sure that you keep scrolling and look at those page numbers to make sure that you're seeing the entirety of the collection. And then that first part is going to look very similar to what we already looked at, where you're going to get that same kind of preamble that kind of talks about the collection and when it was donated and when this was updated. And then we're going to start all over again with those different series as well. So here we can see these are a little bit different than the series that we had in the initial donation. These are biographical and academic and so on and so forth. So I mentioned sub-series before, and this is a great example. So the first listing that we looked at didn't have sub-series, but this one does. So you'll see it's noted out, it's saying sub-series 3A and 3B. That's what it'll look like. And then again, just kind of the same thing going down where it's telling you which boxes and folders, we've got dates associated with it. And then that's what the entirety of the finding aid is going to look like. So this one's relatively small. It's only 12 pages. It's only a couple feet. So now that we've had that as our first example, now I'd like to show you the Mundelein College one, because that's going to be a little bit different. That's going to be a little bit bigger. So as you can see, we have a couple of different Mundelein College records. And I won't dwell on these too much because they're also going to be less listed in the Mundelein College paper records. So the Mundelein College paper records is the largest collection. We have some nice see also notes here, so telling you to go to these digital exhibits and also our media portal. We're going to look at all of these in a little bit, but let's check out the finding aid first. And bear with me because that might take a moment to load. Oh good, it's being fast today. Okay, so here we have the PDF again. So we can see the name of the collection, the Mundelein College paper records. It's telling you the span of which the things were collected. Eagle-eyed people here will notice that again, those are not the dates of Mundelein College's existence. Those are the records that are in here. Extent, much larger collection this time. We've got 157 feet and 358 boxes. So this is by and large our largest collection that we have, and this is not even including the photograph collection or some of those other collections that were listed. So the Mundelein College paper records, these are really the sort of foundations of our archives. These are the original administrative records of Mundelein College, and again, this is always a good place to start when you're looking. So these notes are going to be a little bit longer than the ones that we saw for the personal papers. And this collection does have some restrictions, and that's really related to the fact that since this is, an academic institution, there are some things related to FERPA but it's really, really a small part of the collection that is restricted. So I wouldn't get too overly focused on that. We've got quite a few more notes on processing information, so how we went about arranging all of this. Again, if you're interested in how this came to being, kind of the history of the collection, I'll leave that to you on your own time to kind of go back and read through all of this. We have the main administrative history about the college. And then we have the scope and content notes. You can see, because this is a larger and much more complex collection, that all of this preamble part is going to be a lot longer. So this is where we get into some of the other collections that might be helpful to you too. So it's mentioning the audiovisual collection, the oral histories that we've done, Hispanic Institute, Gannon Center, Peace Studies, etc. So those are listed out there to kind of give you those breadcrumbs of other places to look. And then we get into the series. And again, this is 143 pages, so we're not going to go through all of them, but I just kind of want to give you a taste of what's here. So again, this is really more of the administrative records of the college. So you can see there's quite a few sub-series. It's really kind of spanning through the entire existence of Mundelein, and there's quite a bit written out on what each of these things are. So there's more notes for each of these sub-series, again, than that smaller collection that we saw, just because this is so much larger that you really kind of need that preamble. So I'm just going to keep scrolling because I do sort of want to show you what the actual inventory and folder lists look like. See, we're on series 10 already. And they each have their own sub-series, so quite a bit. This is the pro and con of using these PDF finding aids. It's great for, you know, printing out and things like that, but then when you're in a document this size, it doesn't have those nice little hyperlinks. So here we have our subjects again. And then we also kind of left some breadcrumbs in here for you about abbreviations. So we tend to use standardized abbreviations throughout this finding aid and throughout our collections in general. And now on page 24, this is where the actual container list starts. So you can see, just like the other one, we've got the series, the sub-series, the box and the folder, we've got our dates, and then it just kind of goes on and on from there. And here's an example of where something is restricted. So you'll know if it's something restricted and something that you wouldn't be able to look at, but you at least know that it exists. So at some point, when that restriction has expired, you could eventually request that. So again, that's just to kind of let people know that it exists. I will leave that to all of you to kind of peruse through more on your own, because again, we could take plenty of time on that. So I want to make sure that we have time to talk about some of the other Mundelein College specific things. So we have an entire tab on our webpage just devoted to Mundelein content. So the first thing I wanted to note was the newly updated Mundelein timeline. So this was updated in the past year. This is a great place to start if you're looking for just that basic information on when things were founded, when certain schools started and programs started, who was president when, that kind of thing. And it's got some great photos throughout. Also a note about student records and transcripts, since I haven't covered that yet. The WLA does not contain student records or transcripts. If you have a transcript request, that goes through a different office, and all of that info is here on the page. And again, that's kind of due to privacy reasons. I'm going to skip over the digital collections because I'll talk about that in more length. But I did want to highlight our Voices from Mundelein media portal. I wanted to say thank you to everybody who has participated in our most recent calls for participation for Share Your Stories, which is our most recent oral history project focusing on the student experience at Mundelein. Our Mundelein media portal has existed for a couple of years now. It started as a way to take these older oral histories that were done with faculty and administrators and make them available online. And now we're branching out into the student experience. So we're going to have our sort of relaunch of that page in March for Women's History Month. So again, if you'd like to learn when that's going to go live, you can always join our newsletter list or follow us on Facebook to learn when that goes live. We'll also be doing another call for participation for this oral history project a little bit later in the year. We hope to make this an annual project. You're welcome to reach out to us at any time to indicate interest. But again, we'll be putting a call out as well. Some of the exhibits that you might want to explore kind of more on your own time under digital exhibits that are Mundelein related are Activist Mundelein. And then we also have our Peace Studies Origins exhibit. So the digital items that I really want to talk about the most were these digital collections. So we have a number of digital collections that are Mundelein specific. So our digital collections at the WLA, as I mentioned before, might be things that were born digital, so something that was created on a computer, or they could be things that were digitized, so added back in later, digitized later. We've divided out our different Mundelein collections kind of by type. So we have foundations, which is the early years and founding of Mundelein College, and we have the yearbooks and the newspaper. I believe we have a full run of both the yearbooks and the newspaper, but I want to note that they both only ran or were created during certain years, so they don't run the entire span of Mundelein College. The Mundelein class photos, I believe, are also complete, so I'm going to take you there because I'm assuming this is going to be very popular. So we do have class photos from 1932 to 1933. It's going to bring you to Preservica, and then you would just click the little icon. And this is something too where a lot of times people are looking for a particular person, and then when you download it, it might not be the best resolution. So if you're playing around on here and you want something that looks a little bit crisper or clearer, and you want that nicer scan, please feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to send you a file that's a little bit higher resolution, again, if you're trying to get that one little thumbnail out of there. The collection I wanted to talk about the most is the college photograph collection. So we're gonna bounce over to Preservica. So as you can see, this page is a little bit different from the WLA webpage that we've been looking at. Preservica is the software that we use for most or all of our digital collections at Loyola. So this is not specifically a Women in Leadership Archives thing. There are also collections in Preservica that are related to the university archives or libraries. So if you end up clicking something and wind up not in the WLA anymore, that's what happened. You might have, went one step back too far. You can tell where you are by these different navigational clues. So when I hover over this, I can see we're in the Mundelein photograph collection. And then I can see here from this navigation that we're in Women in Leadership Archives, Mundelein College Records, and then it gets cut off, but that next folder is the photograph collection. So what can we do in here? So we have all the different photographs that are listed in this way. You can have things displayed in a couple different ways. Right now we're in list view. We can also tell it to display in a table. Preservica is always a little bit slow, so it's going to take its time. Or you can also arrange by title. So again, that's what those different views look like. You can also tell it what to sort by. So you can sort by type, not really applicable to a photograph collection because there are going to be photos, but that is a thing that exists. You can sort by title. It defaults to title. And a lot of our titles start with year. So sort of by default, it might go kind of chronological, but we don't always start with the year. This little triangle is also important because it tells you the sort order. So if we tell it title and it's pointing, up, that's gonna be alphabetical order. If we tell it to point down, it's gonna be reverse alphabetical order. So you can see we've got all these great pictures of Yellow House. We can also sort by date or creator. And again, it's just going to take a minute to decide what it wants to do. There we go. So I'm going to open up some of the photos in particular just to kind of show you at the item level what that looks like and kind of what you can do with the photos. And again, it always loads a little bit slow just because there is so much content. So if you click something and it takes a minute, it might not be you, it might just be loading. There we go, still loading, okay. So now we're at the actual item itself. We've got all this information here. So we've got the title, it's got the publisher, so it's telling us who it's from, the creator, Mundelein College. And some of these are hyperlinked too, so if you place your mouse over the words and you see that there's a little link, that's going to bring you everything that has the same title or that same creator. If you were searching by date, you could also search by date in that way. And then we have more information. So we have a description of the photo, how big it is, these different subject terms, if you were trying to search by different subject terms, telling you what collection it's a part of, what type of thing it is, the rights, and then the identifier. So one great troubleshooting thing to note, if you ever need to reach out to us because you want to use a photo in a publication or you would like a higher resolution version of a photo, it's really helpful for us to have not just the name of the photo, but also the identifier. Sometimes the photos can be really similarly named, like this one's just chemistry department. So I'm assuming we have some other really similar ones. So if we have the identifier, that really helps to narrow it down. Okay, so you found this photo, you like it, now what? We can look at these different displays for how we're viewing it. We can make the photo bigger. And I'm assuming at some point you're going to want to download it. So this little button here is the download button. Very important to remember that that's where it is. It won't let you right click and save if that's sort of your instinct for saving a photo. So again, if you want to save the photo for later, make sure you are hitting download. These links are also unique too. So if you want to bookmark and come back to it later, that's also an option. So then you just download. So when it downloads as the identifier name as well. So again, you don't necessarily have to write down or note what the thing is if you think you're going to be reaching out to us. That's the identifier. Once in a great while, there might be a glitch where you download the photo and maybe it didn't download properly. Again, please let us know if you're encountering any tech issues like that. If you're having problems downloading something or it didn't go through properly, someone else is probably going to have that problem too. So let us know and we'll be sure to fix it and to get you a copy of the photo that you wanted. So I don't want to get too much more complicated than that because I don't want to overwhelm today. But I did want to note that we also do have a search function. So like for today's presentation, I just put in computer because I wanted to find some pictures of people by a computer. So let's look to see what that would look like. So as you can see, this is searching the collections at large. And when you have your search results, it's going to tell you what it's affiliated with. So again, like I said, these are the digital collections for the university, not just the WLA. So I could look at my results and see, okay, these are from Mundelein College. Those are the photos I want to go after. But then I'll also tell you, okay, this is School of Law, or you know, other programs or other archives that are in the system as well. So just some things that I wanted to note. And also worth noting again that the photos that we have here in Preservica are only a small fraction of what we have available. We have hundreds, if not thousands, of Mundelein College photos, and we're only in the hundreds of digitizing them. So again, these are just, it's not a fraction of a percentage anymore, it's an actual percentage now. But again, it's a small percentage of the collection. So just because it's not on Preservica doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So if you're looking for something from a certain year or department or subject matter that you're not finding, please reach out to us, and we're happy to do that searching for you and digitize things for you. So I will kind of pause there. I'm going to go back to the slide with my contact info on it. We've got just a couple minutes left for questions. So thanks everybody for your time and attention, and I'll open it up to everybody else for questions.
Hi, I don't have a question, but I just want to say this was so helpful, and it was just this is great because I actually kind of stumbled into here in December, and I was sharing some pictures with some of my former classmates because I wanted to send something out to my friends because obviously last year was a really bad year. So I was able to find, it took me a little while, but I was able to find some pictures from when we were in school, and everybody loved them. They brought smiles to people's faces. They brought a smile to my face, and I think we all kind of needed it last year, especially around Christmas. So this is great, and I'm going to share this information with all of my alumni friends, and we'll definitely be donating stuff because we were in a small sorority that was on campus there in the later years of the college's existence. So thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to hearing more from you in the future. Thank you.
Emily, I'd like to say it was a terrific presentation, and I just need to look at it again. Is there a way that I can review this somewhere? Is this going to be a link that I can just look at tonight, or, you know, when I'm not at work?
Yeah, so we are recording, so everybody will get a recording of the presentation. I'll also send out my slides, so the first couple of slides that we saw in the beginning. And then of course our webpage is here on this last slide, so it's luc.edu/WLA. That's what we were exploring. And again, if you get stuck or can't find where we were navigating to, always just send me an email. Happy to answer more complicated search questions too with Preservica, but I didn't want to get quite to that level either. So yeah, feel free to be in touch.
And Emily, for us just to access the archive tomorrow morning, we just go into WL archives at luc.edu.
Yeah, so if you have a reference question that you'd like us to answer, that's our main email. So if you want to look at the material that we were going over today, the webpage that we were looking at was luc.edu/WLA. So that's the site that has all of our finding aids, that's the links out to Preservica, etc.
But how about if we just want to get into it? How about if I want to go into tomorrow and start looking?
So right now, we are not physically open at Piper Hall for researchers. So that's kind of that remote research and reference request that I was talking about. So if you know that there's a certain subject that you're interested in or certain years that you'd like to research, you can send us an email or leave us a voicemail. And someone will get back to you to kind of coordinate so that we can be your eyes and ears in the archives and look through those files for you.
Okay, that is my question about, I'm interested in the Skyscraper. Do you remember the Mundelein Skyscraper newspaper? Okay, do you have any idea of when those will be open to people looking at them?
Yes, so I have great news for you. You can access those now online. So I brought the page back up, and if you're under this digital collections part,
how do I get in there?
Perfect. So I'll start you from scratch from our WLA page so you can find it. So it's starting from our homepage, luc.edu/WLA. We go to Mundelein College, and then Skyscraper newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Going to bring you to this page. Again, always takes a minute to load. And now this is that folder in Preservica that has all of them. So once you're in Preservica, you'll see everything, all the issues that we have. It's telling you the date of the issue. So that's how you know we have all these different ones. And then you would just click on the thumbnail. Again, it's a little slow, so it's going to take a minute. And then
Perfect.
that'll bring you to the specific issue.
Perfect. That's all I need. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This was great. Very, very helpful. Thank you, Emily.
Oh, you're welcome.
Emily, can you zoom into one of those newspapers so I can see if I can really read it?
Sure. So for the newspapers, each page was scanned separately. So you do have to kind of go back and click through. And then this is where the navigation on the page is really nice because you can zoom in and then it'll focus.
Well, that's great. That's perfect. Perfect.
Emily, I have a question.
Yeah.
I've got several photographs that were taken while I was at Mundelein. And if I want to donate those, how do I indicate who is in the photograph and when it was taken?
Great question. So with those, if you can perhaps even like write on a piece of paper, you know, and just on a piece of paper kind of separate from the photograph. If it's something like that where you're putting a Post-it note on it, if you can alert us to the fact that there's a Post-it note and then we can transfer that information. I just want to make sure that whatever people are doing to their collections, it's something reversible, and it's something that if there is something like a Post-it note that we can catch it right away, and then that adhesive isn't going to do any damage for the collections. That actually reminded me of another point too. If you're going through our digital collections, and you're recognizing people in photos, feel free to email us and let us know who those people are. We're going off of, you know, what's on folder titles or what's written on the back of photos, and not everything is always identified. So if you have that info about, you know, a building or a date or a person's name, we're always happy to have that. Just looking through the chat as well, see if there's any other questions that I missed. So Mary Frances, I got yours. And then Claire was asking about the paper documents, their digitization. So she asked, so most of these paper documents aren't digitized. That's correct. So only a small fraction of the collection is digitized. So we prioritized some of those circulating things as well, like the newspaper, like the yearbooks, and things that we thought would be of the highest interest to people. So class photos, we assumed class photos were going to be very popular, so those have been digitized. And then we've also going back through the photo collection, and that'll be an ongoing project. We had started that right before the pandemic, and I had intended that to be a part of our ongoing workflow, to just do that on sort of a weekly basis to keep digitizing. And of course that got put on hold. So we will continue to digitize as staff time allows. So it looks like we're just a little bit after 2. So I don't want to keep people too long. I appreciate your attention so much up to this point. I will linger on for just a little bit longer in case there are any other questions that people want to ask. But thank you again so much for your time and attention and interest. There were some very interesting questions today, so thank you all so much.